I'm Dr. John Gartner,
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
and welcome to this preview of Shrinking Trump.
This week in our show, we have a really great guest. He's a political philosopher named Jason Stanley, and he teaches at Yale, and he's just come out with an extraordinary book on fascism and on the ways in which fascism relies upon the ignorance of the public. It's so timely, and he's really kind of terrific. So I really hope that you'll watch the interview, and we do have an excerpt of it, right, John?
Yes, we do. And if you like that, then listen to the whole show. I read somewhere that you wrote an article the day after the election in which you said the end of democracy was not a surprise. Now, that's a very controversial statement at two levels. A lot of people are asking, how dire are things? Has democracy been ended, or is there still a chance for resistance? And if so, what would that even look like?
Well, of course, there's a chance for resistance. Look at what had just happened in Korea. The president tried to declare martial law. The people wouldn't stand for it. Look at what happened in Bangladesh. The students went on the street and took down the Sheikh Hasina, the authoritarian president. And now Bangladesh, they killed hundreds of students, but they still deposed the government. So of course there's resistance. And we live in a country that is legendary everywhere in the world for its resistance to fascism. And that is, and what I mean is the civil rights movement. The Jim Crow South was a one-party fascist, racial fascism, as it's traditionally theorized in the Black intellectual tradition, and a non-violent protest, a non-violent movement that had years and years of organizing and planning overthrew it. So now, of course, the South remains non-democratic. It remains, North Carolina dominated by Republicans, even though there are more registered Democrats than Republicans. We know all of this. We know the ways in which the South has remained a one-party state, largely, and white dominated. But no, there's always there's always routes out. Democracy is a practice. Democracy is not a on-off thing. It's a practice of trying to be guided by the two great democratic values, freedom and equality. And you're living in a democracy when there's this constant struggle to realize those values. And you're not living in a democracy where people are like, we love the king, and everything we do should be for the glory of the king. That's not a democracy. So
that's kind of what they're trying to get us to be at, right? I mean, that's kind of part of what you're talking about when you talk about rewriting history, when you talk about the use of language and propaganda. Maybe you could explain something about how these things shape people's minds in ways that then can shape politics.
Yeah, I mean, erasing history is about the education system, and the education system is there to prepare citizens either for democracy or for authoritarianism. In a monarchy, you would learn about the greatness of the monarch. You would learn about the greatness of the nation under the monarch. In a democratic system, you would have democratic schools and democratic universities that prepared you, the citizen, to be a policymaker, to be someone who's engaged in the business of the government. That's why in a democracy, you learn about other countries. You'd learn about the history of the Middle East, so you could make informed decisions about who's making the right choices about Israel, Palestine, and other countries. Once they start shutting down that kind of education, once they start telling people, okay, you can't learn about the history of the Middle East, you can't learn about the history of your country, you can't learn about the perspectives of LGBTQ citizens, then you're no longer living in a democracy. Just consult in your head. Look up, everyone, and consult in their head their model of a fascist or authoritarian state. Fascism being one variety of authoritarianism. It would be, they'd ask you to pledge allegiance to the nation all the time. They'd say you're first, you must love the nation and the leader represents the nation. And all this talk of democracy and all this talk of freedom and equality would not be there. It wouldn't be, okay, you wouldn't be asked to play a role in making decisions about what the nation could do. You'd be asked for blind obedience.
I was looking at your article too, which is, you talk about one of the conditions for the loss of democracy is gross inequality, which we've been seeing. I remember even 20 years ago, they were talking about how long can CEOs be making hundreds of millions of dollars when their workers are not. And in fact, my understanding, just looking at this moment in the culture, right, which is, first of all, you have a catastrophic working class that cannot afford to have a family in a house with two people working. They can barely do it, and they're demoralized and they're furious. Also, there's been a real degradation of the social norms and mental health norms, so that schools are not just schools. They're giving free lunch and free breakfast. They're doing assessments. They're doing mental health assessments. I had students doing psychotherapy under my supervision in the rural schools outside of Ithaca. And the schools were beside themselves. I mean, they could barely get their kids to learn because they were suffering so much. And if you put that together with the breakdown of a kind of central media, where now you can go get your news in the way that you like it, it seems to me this is all coming together to create a terrible moment for us, an opportunity for Trump.
Yeah, so this just again gets back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the modern philosopher who sort of came up with the grand theory of how democracy could work. And Rousseau's idea was that democracy cannot work with gross inequalities, because then people filled with resentment for each other. And then a demagogue could come and exploit those resentments and aim them at scapegoats. So that's Rousseau's idea. And Rousseau's solution is to have equality so people won't have so many resentments. The idea is that, if there's massive inequality, people are really just filled with anger and resentment. And you could a clever propagandist could direct that resentment away from its true causes, which are, as we see in the Trump administration, the billionaires
exactly
take control of the government and privatize everything and make life much more miserable for everyone.
Yeah. You're talking about the education. Are you familiar with this? You probably are. There's this company, Prager, I think they're called, that make these propagandist cartoons that are being shown in Florida, for example, where they're trying to, rewrite the whole issue of slavery. And they have these little cartoons like, in slavery, Black people learned useful skills. So slavery was kind of a job training program. And this is a real, a cartoon that they're showing in Florida schools.
Yeah, I discuss it in my book.
I figured you probably did.
I talk about Prager. Prager University is Prager University. I talk about multiple videos from PragerU. 6 states allow them as educational resources in the classroom. So I won't go into detail about the different Prager University videos, but yeah, they're straight propaganda videos, like the Origins of Slavery one, narrated by Candace Owens. She says, white men were the first people ever to eliminate slavery. And she repeats
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Right.
Completely omitting, W.B. Du Bois's book, Black Reconstruction, is all about how Black Black Americans were deeply involved. You couldn't have won the Civil War without Black Americans, without Black soldiers fighting for the Union, and without general strike without enslaved Black Americans in the South, doing work stoppages and work slowdowns. There was, Candace Owens represents it entirely as pre-Du Boisian history. Black Americans didn't lift a finger to save themselves, and of course, Haiti, the only country that had a successful slave rebellion. It wasn't whites who did it. PragerU are particularly, their videos are all about feeding the myth of this great mythic white innocent past. It wasn't so bad. It was great. There's one about Christopher Columbus, who we know was like a massive, and the horrors of the Spanish colonial conquest of the Americas. Completely, there's this discussion between these two cartoon characters where they're like, well, don't judge. One of them's talking to a cartoon Christopher Columbus, and Christopher Columbus says, "I shouldn't be judged by the standards of today." And actually, Bartholomew de Casas wrote a book in the 16th century about the horrors of Spanish colonialism. And what was happening, and talking about, people being roasted alive and pregnant women having their babies torn from their bellies. And, so it was very well known what was happening. I mean, it was easily recognized. It wasn't well known. It was easily recognizable to any empathetic human being. So this is all massively misrepresented. And it's the kind of Jim Crow history that was told, and it completely, and then that's a method of representing schools and universities as anti-American.
That was a terrific interview, Harry.
I think so too. A wonderful person and such a good thinker. And so if you want to see the whole thing, including long discussions that John and I have about what's going on with Trump and his proposed cabinet, but also we talk about ways of thinking about this period of time and the psychological impact it has on all of us. So I hope you'll find us. We're on the Really American Network. Our new shows drop every Friday at 3:00. Tell your friends, and I hope we'll see you there.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram at MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.